Standards Committee meeting of the 13th of November 2025. Welcome to you all. Can we note agenda item 1, filming at meetings? Can we please note that meetings are filmed as per usual? Item 2, apologies for absences. Richard?
None received.
Thank you very much. Item 3, urgent items of business. Richard?
None.
Wonderful. Item 4, are there any declarations of interest?
None received.
Thank you very much. Committee members, can I take you to item 5, which is the minutes through pages 1 to 4? I've had a good look to have it for accuracy, but if we could please confirm the minutes from the Standards Committee meeting on the 30th of June as a correct and accurate record. So I'll take them in turn. Page 1. Oh, brilliant. Wonderful. I've read them. I'm very happy with them. Others agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Can it be noted? Item number 6, changes to the planning protocol. Colleagues, please note this is on pages 5 through to 118. And can I introduce the director to the report?
Thank you very much, Chair. We have an existing planning protocol on 2017. We've looked at good practice, peer challenge. We've consulted probably with members on the Institution Working Group and also with members on the Strategic Planning Committee. And we've also considered changes in light of government laws to planning committees. So the general changes are summarised in the report. The headlines are there's updates and tidying up of the protocol, lots of removing of duplication and inconsistency, clarifying the running order for planning committee meetings, clarifying options of eligibility for planning applications to planning subcommittee, clarifying that planning decisions cannot be made on the part of political process, introducing a new strategic planning briefing, renaming Development Management Forum to Planning Forum, clarifying the process of petitions, clarifying a step-by-step process for motions, including those contrary to officer recommendation, and finally, clarifying the approach for deferrals. So the appendices have the existing 2017 protocol, track change version of the protocol, and then a clean version of the new one. So I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you for your report, Rob. And just to say that I really welcome the renaming of the Development and Management Forum to Planning Forum. I think that's far more understandable for members of the public. So I really welcome that. And can I put record thanks to the officers and the colleagues on the Constitutional Working Group. Are there any questions? Well, you're not the only one. There's also Councillor Blake as well.
I just agree with everything Councillor Bennett.
Wonderful. I'm glad the chair of planning's happy. That's the key thing. Wonderful. Well, with that, can I invite colleagues to approve the recommendations I set out on page 5 of the agenda? Are those recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rob, for the presentation. Moving on to item number 7, changes to the financial regulations. Colleagues note that this is through pages 119 to 156. Can I invite Tara and just online to move the report, please? Tara, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies I'm not there in person, and I will keep this brief as mentioned. So I'm presenting the updated finance regs today that were last updated in March 2021. It is good practice to review quite regularly, so that it was probably overdue for a review, and I think it's even more, when I talk about some of the changes, even more important now in our current financial position. Just to say before I highlight through the changes, we will, subject to the finance regs being agreed by full council later on in the month, we will be doing extensive engagement with the organisation and particularly budget managers on essentially resetting their roles and responsibilities, and we will be using that to hold them to account for managing within their budget and aligning with these finance regs. So many of the changes that we have made are largely in terms of job titles, given previous restructures and changing in reporting lines. However, the most significant change that I need to draw to your attention is that the regulations up until now did not include any requirement for budget holders to remain within their budget. And this has been addressed in the draft that you see. Corporate directors, in addition, must now also notify myself as a Section 151 officer of all overspends and underspends before they are expected to happen or at the earliest opportunity, so that they can discuss with me any mitigations or funding options if they are genuinely uncontrollable. I feel that these changes are essential to tighten our financial control environment and support in moving us to a more sustainable financial position. So the paragraphs that I would particularly draw your attention to are paragraph 5.21, which is on page 131 of your pack, and particularly point G in that section, and also paragraph 5.24, which is on page 134 of your pack. You will also, so with those of you that were familiar with the finance regs before, we have also removed reference to the debt recovery process for Homes for Haringey, simply because that doesn't exist as a separate entity, and therefore debt recovery is covered as part of the overall council processes rather than having to be something separate. So largely what I would call housekeeping amendments, but just those two key paragraphs that I would particularly like to draw the committee's attention to. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tara. And just to say, I really welcome the inclusion of point G in particular. That's really quite helpful, especially considering our fiscal situation. Are there any questions from the committee members?
I think that's really useful to see that the budget, the finance, a bit much more controlled and checked out through the directorate. So I welcome that. Thanks, Byron.
Thank you, Chair of Audit. It's very good to have your endorsement as well. Any other colleagues, comments, interventions? No. Well, thank you, Tara, for the report. Can I move that we approve the recommendations as set out on page 119 of the agenda?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tara. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
I believe we're on item 8, which might be a double act between Tara and Barry. Am I wrong? Okay. Okay. Well, this is on the proposed changes to the council's contract standing orders, which seems to be a very long ongoing saga. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's I get concerned when it's on the agenda. Let's see it back on the agenda. So if I can encourage either Barry or Tara or both to move the report, please.
I'll take us through the report, Chair.
Yeah.
So obviously back in March we the council endorsed basically know all of the contract standing orders to take account of the Procurement Act and also the centralisation of £25,000. However, in that process there were a couple of omissions and a couple of recommendations that's kind of come from colleagues in relation to some minor amendments to the CSOs. So I have consulted with colleagues in legal, the corporate leadership team, the constitutional working group in terms of proposed amendments. There are 3 that I'm committed to take note of. The first one being an omission of the last draft in terms of allowing directors to vary and extend contracts up to £500,000. So currently with the drafting, it only allows them to award contracts up to £500,000. It's always been previously the ability for them to extend and to vary those, and that is consistent with other parts of the Constitution. The second one is around letters of intent. Currently, the Constitution allows officers to effectively do a letter of intent, contracts, either £100,000 or 10% of the value, whichever is the greater. However, that opens up that provision for abuse, whereby potentially officers could issue a letter of intent up to the full value of a contract less than 100,000. So we don't feel that that's appropriate, and therefore we're recommending that it's 50% of the contracts that are below 100,000 as being a maximum or a cap in terms of that. And then the final one is off the back of an audit recommendation, which is the Chief Procurement Officer is advised of novations, all novations for contracts. So novation being where a contract's transfer from one entity to another entity because it might be a change in ownership or something like that. And that's really there just so that I can ensure that it complies with the Procurement Act and then the relevant financial standards and other checks that are associated with it. They're the proposed changes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Tara, do you have any comments?
No, nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. Take a seat, Michelle.
Thank you.
You're always welcome. Brilliant. Can I then invite colleagues to any comments, any questions you'd like to make? No?
Welcome these measures. it's really important in terms of the finance and managing the budgets and the contracts. It often comes out in audit committee, so I think I welcome these changes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's always good to have the endorsement of audit. These matters. Right. If that's, if there are no further contributions, can I request colleagues approve the recommendations as set out on pages 157 through to 158 of the agenda? Are those recommendations agreed?
Which,
Thank you very much. And thank you, Tara, and thank you, Barry. Have a lovely evening. Item number 9, committee work programme. I believe at this point, we're going to, well, colleagues are welcome to make any suggestions. I don't have any to mind myself. I think the next committee meeting, we probably want to hear from Michelle. You can't talk when I'm talking. It's very rude. I'm just joking, winding you up. I just want to get through this meeting very quickly. So essentially, I want to draw colleagues to the, unless you might want to have some comments regarding the standards framework, the conduct framework.
Only to say that, as you know, there was a consultation by government end of last year up to February this year, I think. And in last week, government has published the outcome of that consultation. So they received just over 2,000 responses, 2,092, I think. And out of that, they have confirmed some very high level recommendations that they would like to bring forward. And oops, I made a note. And they're quite interesting, but we're obviously quite a long way off from that becoming law. And so the 8 main recommendations that have come forward are introduction of a mandatory code, which will include a behavioural code within it, because currently we have a code, but we're required to have a code, but we can decide what goes into the code. And so the change will be a mandatory code that has certain basic baseline requirements. For all authorities to have a formal standards committee. For authorities to offer individual support to councillors and the complainants up to investigation process. And there'll be a right to review if you've had a code of conduct complaint made against you. And one of the main findings in the feedback was that local authorities lack the real power to sanction councillors for conduct. And so what they're looking at is the power to suspend elected members for 6 months for serious code of conduct breaches, with the option to withhold allowances during suspension and to introduce premises and facilities bans as additional sanctions. And then it says, in response to the most serious allegations involving police investigations or where there's a sentence pending, the introduction of powers to suspend elected members on an interim basis for a period of 3 months, and then can be reviewed thereafter. So there's some quite serious penalties that will come in with a lot more bite in terms of behaviour. And also looking at the end of that process, an appeals process for those councillors who are suspended or who've had their allowances suspended as well. So there's a lot of work to be done by government to bring this in. We don't know what the final picture would look like, but it's certainly a move to giving councils more power to sanction councillors for breaching the code of conduct.
so when is this going to come into effect? Is it?
No idea. It's early days. Literally, they've just published the consultation responses, and I think they're aware.
And in this consultation, so
No,
Through the chair.
No, of course.
in this consultation, does councils put recommendations or what that kind of review process looks like? Do you have any insight?
Nothing at all at the
Okay.
moment. There's no flesh on the bones. It's very high level, 8 recommendations from this consultation feedback. So at the moment, we're waiting to see what that would look like eventually.
I assume the government normally, when they have responses to a consultation, they'll either tack it onto a piece of legislation that's going through Parliament, then introduce it as a statutory instrument,
Yeah,
depending
I
on,
think about it an SI.
maybe an SI
Yeah.
probably.
Fine line between the politics and the processes within the
Yes.
council. How's that's gonna fit, you know, you can easily be suspended because of your political views. So there needs to be like a fine line where that
Absolutely.
section is applied.
Guidance. and
Yes, because,
there
yeah,
need to be clarity.
clarity, because I think
Yeah.
we need to
Yeah.
political views articulated and then different voices.
Absolutely.
And that shouldn't be a force to prevent them taking part in these kind of debates and discussions constructively.
Yeah.
Abusively, but I think there needs to be a mechanism in place to allow that conversation to happen.
I want to bring in Councillor Blake.
Well, I mean, it'll be interesting to see the detail of which, I mean, I do agree. I think having an updated code or
Yeah.
looking at it, because we've had the Nolan
Yeah.
for a long time now. And I
Yeah,
think it's like-
yeah.
I mean, certainly in employment law, you know, you do have vexatious.
Yes.
And I've always thought, you know, in that we do need that. I mean, you know, you can't just put a complaint in
Yes, that's right.
against another council, because it is stressful. I mean, I think it's the same in actual fact for anyone who puts a complaint in against anyone,
Yeah.
that there should be a clause in that says that, you know, there is going to be a view taken whether this is a vexatious
That's right.
a vexatious complaint. So, I mean, I think that's,
Yeah, I think that stays the same currently, the current code of conduct. Then actually it is code and then it goes to subcommittee. It's only if actually there's going to be a sanction. That rules are going to change about what that sanction could be. Because right now, you can have a councillor who's convicted of a serious offence, still goes to all the committee meetings pending sentencing. It's only once they're sentenced that you can actually do something about it. But before that, you can't, in terms of being able to spend them or withhold allowances. Because this is giving you bite at the
Yeah.
point at which you need it.
yeah.
So can you imagine if you are convicted of a criminal offence and you're awaiting sentencing and you're in the community, say it's a sexual offence, you know, and you're in the community, how does that look?
It's just really
Yeah.
bad
It's a
precedent.
bad precedent, yeah.
Correct, you're right on that.
Yeah.
I agree.
Councillor Susan Sapper.
There was an incident when I was newly elected or into my term with the Hackney councillor. And we got a lot of backlash for that, in as much as it was a serious offence. It had been going on for a considerable amount of time. And only when it was in the public domain were we made aware of it. And that's when they were forced to resign. And then there was another election. I think that there has to be different governance procedures prior to that, that takes them out of the public domain, so that we, as the existing resident councillors, do not feel the backlash of what that, the ramifications of what that was, because they themselves didn't feel it. But I felt it on the doorsteps. I had emails coming to me. I had verbally, you know, bringing the office of a councillor into disrepute, asking and legitimate answers, how many more have you got in there? You know, so I think that it would be really helpful to embrace those new changes so that we can manage things much better before it gets into the public domain. And we have some insight into it. Because I was blindsided when I first heard about it. It was on the news with everybody else.
Well, you're never able to avoid that happening, but I think that will eventually happen at some point, whether it's earlier or later. And it's more about actually having these guidance and protocols in place. That particular council are not able to engage in that situation as in the election process or after.
Yeah.
So maybe, you know, you shouldn't be involved with that particular,
Just a short,
be involved with that kind of
Checks and
engagement,
balances.
checks and balances.
Yes.
I think just to assure you all, last year we did a review of the code of conduct, if you remember. I think one of the things we were very clear about is having a distinction between vexatious
Yeah.
complaints and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
let's just say there are a number of complaints that most council will never ever hear about. Quite frankly, you will never hear about them because they're dealt with accordingly. And I think we've even delegated all our powers to the officers
Yes.
to do that early part assessment. And when something does need to be considered, then there'll be a conversation between me and Fiona to say, well, should this go to some assessment? But 9 out of 10 times, it's
Yeah,
often, you'd never know.
yeah.
But in terms of the points that you're all making, I think the good thing about it is that for the first time since the Eric Pickle reforms, we will get, well, proposals could include some sort of real sanctions. Right now, at the moment, there aren't real sanctions that we can sort of effectively impose on somebody who has been found. The example you give is a good example. Someone's being found criminally wrong or doing something, since it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
It happened a year or 6 months or 2 years. That person in the community, that person amongst other councillors might not feel comfortable being on a committee with that person or working with that person.
Be anything, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But it is important in terms of your human rights, because first of all, you're elected councillors. And you do have rights in terms of if somebody's an allegation against you, the right to have to be represented, to have
Yes,
support, to ask for a review. If you're unhappy with the outcome, there's an appeals process. We don't know what it's going to look like yet, but that is part of the checks and balances as well. So whatever happens, would come to this committee for sign off in any event. So you would be part of that decision.
I'm aware that councillors work, I myself. And sometimes when people are disgruntled with you, they can put in arbitrary complaints which are baseless with no foundation. So I'm relieved to hear that when these nonsensical ones come through, we should turn up at a visit at the right time. You know, those ones are just put in the bin because it's just an unnecessary aggravation.
Well, I can assure you that's why, I'm sure you do turn up to your engagements on time. I would never say you're late to any meeting, but what I would say, is that's the whole point of why we had that conversation last year about making sure, because I think the problem wasn't also to reassure councillors, it was a lot of time that was consumed by the officers, by myself, the previous chair, having to go through every single complaint essentially. And I think now we're at a stage, hopefully, where most things are clearly defined. And can be sort of arbitrarily sort of said that it's vexatious, that's not, that may have merit. It may need a conversation to get a second opinion if to bring it to self-assessment. But thankfully, that has really, I think, helped sort of lower the workload and also make clear to members of the public before you do put in a complaint, just be cognizant what are the issues you're trying to raise. Are there other methods we can use to try and address your concerns as well? So I think that all of that work was done really well in the last sort of municipal year. The one thing I want to draw colleagues' attention to as well is that I would recommend that we undertake a review of the member officer protocol to ensure it's fit for purpose. We haven't done that for quite a long time. And I think we are due to do that. I don't believe we'll have time in the next meeting.
Probably not.
But I think maybe the last meeting of the municipal year, pending what the monitoring officer and deputy monitoring officer think as well.
Municipal.
Yeah, if we have time. Sorry, municipal year. Sorry, if we have time in the March meeting, I think the February meeting's got 3 items on the agenda already. And that's what I know of. Maybe more things that will act on later on. So
On the subject to that,
please.
the members allowance scheme obviously done delivery in on this committee for a fair few years now. Is there any advice that's coming out of government? Anything you've seen?
Nothing I've seen. I don't think we've had an independent remuneration review on it either. I don't think I've seen one this year.
It's quite early in this stage. Sadly, a lot of it is due on the local government pay award, often. And then
Once again, fly blind on this.
as always. But the good thing is we've got a meeting in February, so I think let's pick. But it's good you raise it, and we can put that'll be on the agenda, and I'm sure Richard's picked that up as well. So thank you, councillor. Right, item number 8. There are no items of urgent business. Item number 9, dates of future meetings. Could colleagues please note the following meetings: the 3rd of February, 2026, and the 9th of March, 2026. And with that, I draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much. Good evening, good night, farewell. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.